Good evening and welcome to this League of Women Voters Forum for the candidates in the November election for Senate District 54 and House Districts 54A and B. My name is Liz Nordling and I will be moderating this forum tonight. As a trusted volunteer organization, the League of Women Voters does not support or oppose political parties or candidates. We sponsor forums like this to provide voters an opportunity to hear candidates' views about issues of interest in the upcoming election. For example, many Minnesotans may not be aware that we will be voting on a constitutional amendment this fall. Currently, the legislature sets their own salaries. The proposed amendment would set up a citizen council to determine the salary of state legislators. Information on this topic is available at the sign-in table. You may also find information online at the Secretary of State's website, www.minvotes.org. Click on What's on My Ballot, and you will find a link to the proposed amendment. The order of speaking tonight will begin in alphabetical order by race and will be rotated thereafter. Candidates' remarks are being timed to assure equality of time, and questions are being collected from the audience. Our candidates for Senate District 54 are Leilani Homestead, who is not with us tonight, and Dan Schoen. Our candidates for House District 54A are Keith Franke and Jen Peterson, and for House District 54B, Tony Jurgens and Don Staton. We will begin with opening statements, and we will start with Dan Schoen.
Well, thank you so much, and I thank everybody that came to actually participate tonight and look forward to the questions. And I want to thank the League, as usual, for putting on these great forums. You know, it's unfortunate my opponent isn't here tonight to visit with us as well. I've been your state representative in 54A for the last 4 years, and I'm extremely humbled for the support that I've received for that, and I look forward to doing that in the future. One thing I want to say is that this particular area is seeing an unprecedented amount of mail and targeting of the races for the House seats. And from my perspective, I just want to say that there are 4 amazing human beings sitting to my left, and you're going to see attack mail and garbage that's going to come out that is not representative of any of these people when they say the bad things that they're saying as human beings. So I just want to say that right off the get-go. So thank you.
Thank you. Now with his opening statement is Keith Franke, who is District 54A candidate.
Well, I'd like to start off by thanking the League for this great forum and thanking everybody for showing up and tuning in. This is the largest crowd I've seen in front of the dais in 5 years of being mayor. We could probably wrap all you guys up into 1 year of St. Paul Park issues, and I think that points to the good job we do down in St. Paul Park. I'm the current mayor of St. Paul Park. I'm in my 2nd term. I'm a father and a grandfather. I own the Park Cafe and Frankie's Bar down there. I look forward to serving at the House level for 54A. I want to bring a little bit of no-nonsense and common sense to the House and use the abilities that I've used as mayor to keep our services high and keep taxes low. So once again, I just want to thank everybody for showing up.
Thank you. Now with her opening statement, Jen Peterson.
Thank you. I am Jen Peterson. I am Cottage Grove City Council, 2nd term, so I am in my 8th year. I have 2 other jobs aside from that. I am a health assistant at Lincoln Center Elementary in South St. Paul. And then I also am a home care provider, weekend respite care provider for my nephew. Been taking care of him for 15 years. So I've kind of got my pulse on, or my finger on the pulse in many different areas. I'm also a member of OPEIU, which is a union, and SEIU, another union, for my 2 different positions. I have an education from the College of St. Catherine, 2-year degree, associate's degree in occupational therapy. I'm married to Tony for 19 years, 5 children, and 5 grandchildren, and most of us live right here in Cottage Grove. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are your 2 candidates for 54A. Now in 54B, we'll hear opening comments from Tony Jurgens.
First of all, thank you all for coming. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on tonight. And I think of everyone up here, I'm the only rookie. Everybody else has either been in a candidate forum earlier this year or in prior years. So this is my first go at it, and we'll see how it goes. It's nice to see a bunch of friendly faces here. A little about myself. My wife Dawn and I moved to Cottage Grove about 24 years ago. We raised our 2 daughters here. My daughter Tori is in the crowd here tonight. And I've been very involved in the communities, both Cottage Grove and Hastings, working to make the communities stronger. I don't have time in the last 30 seconds to list all of the different boards and commissions that I've been on, but I just want to say it's a pleasure to be here and be with all of you tonight.
Thank you. Next with his opening statement is Don Staton.
Pronounced Slayton,
Slayton.
long A.
Oh, Slayton. I have it written down wrong. Slayton. Got it.
Okay, all right, thank you. Good evening, I'm Don Slayton, and I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I've spent my life in service to my country and my community. I'm a Navy veteran who served on a fast attack submarine during the Vietnam War. I continue to be active in veteran affairs. I currently serve on the Hastings Planning Commission and have served on the Washington County Planning Commission and the Denmark Board of Supervisors. I lived in our district for over 40 years. I'm a father, a grandfather, and a community volunteer. On April 15th, I set out door knocking our district. I recently bought my 4th pair of shoes. I learned about the issues that concerned our community. As your representative, I would be honored to fight for strengthening our schools, protecting our water, fixing our infrastructure, and standing up for working families. We need an economy that works for everyone willing to work hard. Those who work to make a living should be able to make a good life. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to the first question, which was given to the candidates ahead of time, and the question goes first to Don Slayton, and it is, what do you believe are the 2 greatest challenges the state will need to address over the next 10 years?
Actually, there are far more than 2 things that really need to be addressed over the next 5 years. That's just the tip of the iceberg. The continuing rise of health care and the prescription drug costs probably will remain our #1 issue throughout the coming years. The costs have continually risen over my lifetime over the last 30 years. Ensuring we support and replace our aging infrastructure, including roads, bridges, water plants, sewers, and healthcare facilities, leaving a strong economy. Our state depends on this. We depend on clean water from our water plants, from our sewer plants. Without clean water, we have nothing in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you. The question now goes to Keith Franke.
I believe that the 2 major issues that are going to be facing our area and the state of Minnesota as a whole, definitely I don't think you're going to find one person up here that doesn't agree that it's health care is one of them. The rising costs, the loss of coverage, the inability for the legislature to work together to deal with these issues, and the other one is infrastructure. I think infrastructure, for one, we need to work within a budget, set priorities, and go from there. And I believe those are the 2 major issues that we need to work on when we get to the legislature. Healthcare, infrastructure, and those are about the 2. So if you're limiting me at 2, those are 2. Thank you.
Thank you. The question now goes to Jen Peterson.
Thank you. I do think that the 2 main issues that are facing us over the next 5 years and on from there are education. That will always be a big issue. And then healthcare is, again, always a big issue, but it seems to be much more of an issue lately. I say education because of the rising cost of education for higher education, and also on the local taxpayers for affording the cost of education for the public schools. And then for healthcare, I've worked in senior living and I work in healthcare, actually in both my positions, and I see the effects of the medication costing too much. I see the effects of people not being able to get the services they need. And with the aging population and the the tsunami of seniors coming, we need to make sure that we can provide them all the health care and services that they need at an affordable price.
Thank you. The question now goes to Dan Schoen.
I think what's important to understand is that for every family and every member of our community, the most important thing is different. And there will be, by the amount of phone calls that I get from community members, it's going to be varied from one side of town to the next, and it's going to be varied from one house to the next. It's going to be health care. It's going to be cost of living. It's going to be how much does the gas cost down at Super America and St. Paul Park. Those are absolutely individual issues, and they're important not to forget too. But I will tell you what will get us to the point of solving all of our issues is the number one issue is the extreme partisanship that's seeping its way into our state capitol. And it's Washington-style politics. And what's going to be important is campaign finance reform and keeping dark money out of politics because, for instance, this tracker in the back of the room has a camera pointed at one candidate and one candidate alone. Is going to record him the entire time, hoping that maybe he picks his nose or makes some sort of funny gesture, and it'll end up in a campaign ad.
Question now goes to Tony Jurgens.
Going last, I've heard a lot of good examples already, and if I were to limit myself to the top two, I would also agree that it's infrastructure and healthcare. Just recently, Blue Cross Blue Shield pulled out of the individual healthcare market. That leaves 107,000 Minnesotans without insurance coverage. So they need to go to the rest of the companies in the market, and some of those companies are limiting with quotas. So if you don't get in before they hit their quota, now you have fewer choices. When you have fewer choices, what does that mean? You're paying higher prices. There also needs to be infrastructure, and not just the roads and bridges in the transportation bill, but also in the bonding bill. And Representative Schoen mentioned bipartisanship. There was a bonding bill that had bipartisan support, and the governor and the legislature let politics get in the way, and nothing got done. And we need to stop that. When I'm in the legislature, I'll take a balanced approach to finding solutions to these problems.
Thank you. The second question was also submitted to our candidates ahead of time, and it will go first to Keith Franke, and it is, what qualifications would you bring to office if elected to meet those challenges?
The qualifications that I bring forward to help meet some of these issues that we're going to be dealing with, I think, number one starts at being a father and a grandfather. Being somebody who wants to represent and make decisions that will impact my children and my grandchildren's lives. Secondly, my years of being mayor. I've been able to work with anybody and everybody. Since we are technically a highly DFL district, I've worked with Dan and many others to get legislation passed and to accomplish other issues. I sit on the Red Rock Corridor Commission. I sit on the South Washington County Cable Commission. I'm also the president of our EDA. These are all things that I've used and tools that I've taken experience from that I will bring forward to use a little no-nonsense, as I've said before, to get things accomplished because I'm not afraid to speak up to whoever it may be, which party it may be, whether it's my own or another, because ultimately it's all about representing the citizens of this area.
Thank you. Question now goes to Dan Schoen.
Well, thank you. As a police officer in this community for the last 15 years, holding positions as a paramedic, narcotics and violent crime detective, business liaison officer, and I'm on the SWAT team as a hostage crisis negotiator, a member of the Newport St. Paul Park Lions, and then your state representative for the last 4 years, being in the majority and the minority and working with folks from both sides of the aisle and all our community leaders as well. It's been humbling, but yeah, being a dad of 2 kids and just living in the community and trying to make ends meet just like everybody else has to is really what the qualification should be for anyone. We want representation of our community that looks like us, that lives like us, and that is the number one thing that I believe I bring to the table, and it's communicating and working with each other, with other folks that are in the legislature and in our community.
Thank you. The question now goes to Don Slayton. Slayton. I will have it right by the end of the night, I promise.
Lots of people pronounce my name wrong, spell my name wrong. There's 5 different spellings of the generic base of it. So that's okay. Everyone here brings a lifetime of experience to this campaign. No matter which position we're running for, we all bring that. We all have family. We all bring a passion to what we're doing. From Danny down there all the way across, we believe in what we've done our whole life. I bring a lifetime of experience. I have a veteran's perspective from VFW to Legion to father to grandfather to my union background. We are all family. We're one.
Thank you. The question now goes to Tony Jurgens.
I think I'm uniquely qualified because of my ties to the communities both here in Cottage Grove and also in Hastings. Currently, I'm on the Economic Development Authority in Cottage Grove, and I chair the Public Works or Public Services Commission in Cottage Grove. I'm also on the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee, Washington County Library Board. I'm on the Finance Council at my church in Hastings. My kids went to school K through 8 at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in Hastings and then graduated from Hastings High School. I'm on the Knights of Columbus in Hastings. All of this involvement gives me a unique perspective to represent the entire district of 54B. I've got a business degree from Southwest Minnesota State University. I've been involved in business for almost 30 years at different levels. I'm currently an independent insurance agent, and I'm just looking forward to the opportunity to represent you, the people of 54B, in the Minnesota House of Representatives.
Thank you. The question now goes to Jen Peterson.
Thank you. I bring 8 years of service as an elected official, but aside from that, I really base a lot of my experience based on my own life experience and also my experience as a volunteer in the community for many, many years. I've volunteered and I continue to volunteer at many different levels, whether that's at the city level, county level, or the state level through different nonprofits that address issues of that affect low-income people for the most part. And then also as a healthcare provider, now where I am doing home care and also with my previous experience working in long-term care in Woodbury, so I bring that experience, and then also working in education now for about 10 years. So I bring that experience. I've also been a consumer of public assistance services, so I've seen what works and what doesn't work and where there's room for improvement. And, you know, I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, and I have strong ties to this district, so I'm committed.
Thank you. The next question comes from the audience, and it goes first to Jen Peterson. I'm uninsurable. What will you do to the healthcare system to assure that I will keep affordable insurance?
Well, for one thing, I don't think that a lot of the insurance options are actually affordable right now. So I think there's definitely room for improvement with MNsure and other insurance options. I think the insurance companies make way too much money and make way too many decisions on what services and what medication and what doctors people are going to see. Some of those decisions need to be made by the doctor, and the insurance company needs to stay out of it. So I think we need to make sure that we have a larger pool with more people in it, more healthy people, more sick people. Everybody together kind of balances each other out. I'm a supporter of universal single-payer health care. I'd like to see that come about. And then, you know, everybody's insurable. I'd like to see that for everybody. And portability. I hate the fact that people lose their insurance when they move from job to job for people that have that tie. Thank you.
Thank you. The question now goes to Tony Jurgens.
Well, through MNsure, you do have coverage, but if MNsure is changed or done away with, there was a catch-all called MNCHIP, I believe it was, that was done away with when MNsure came in. So if there are major changes to MNsure, if it goes away or whatever the case may be, there needs to be a catch-all for those so that everybody does have the opportunity to be covered by health care. The biggest thing is the affordability. And I talk about how many of the people are now affected by the increases, 40, 50, 60% premium increases. year after year, that's unsustainable. That's what we need to address as well, is what are we going to do to rein in these costs, because it's unaffordable to the families.
Thank you. The question now goes to Don Slayton.
Thank you. No one is uninsurable under MNsure, number one. The volatility of the small market is what drives the cost up for the cost of medical insurance and pharmaceuticals. We need to work on MNsure. Should be the first thing that the legislature does when they're back in session this year, working MNsure and the bonding bill. We need to demand an audit of the insurance companies. 80% of what they take in is supposed to be spent on our health care. Is it really? We need to demand what we really are paying for, what we're getting for our dollar. And that's the bottom line. We do not know.
Thank you. The question now goes to Keith Franke.
You know, it is awful nice going last. A lot of great ideas up here. I think that regardless of how we attack the situation and what decisions are made at the legislature to work with the insurance companies to come up with some type of a high-risk pool or uninsurable task force, we need to make sure that these people are covered. We cannot afford to leave anybody behind. When somebody is stricken with a catastrophic, whether it be injury, sickness, illness, somehow we need to bring them into the fold by working things together. The system's already in place, so we do not want to make sure that they are left behind or left out of the situation because it's beyond their control. And as human beings, I think that we need to make sure that that happens. How we make that happen, I think there's probably different scenarios on both sides, and be willing to discuss all the options, and we put them all on the table just to make sure we are taking care of our people.
Thank you. Now it goes to Dan Schoen.
Don't start my timer yet. I'm going to try and keep this under a minute because it's going to be technical. Now, the plan that Tony was referring to was called MCHA. And when the Affordable Care Act came into place, which is a federal law, folks, it's a federal law, and you've watched Congress over the last couple of years, what's happening there, absolutely zero. All they've done is vote to repeal it instead of taking time to work together in a nonpartisan way to fix the pieces that need to be fixed. Now, in MSHA was a pool of money that was developed from the Healthcare Access Fund. There was other places that it came from. Was a provider tax as well. And it's not a tax on doctors, it's a tax on corporate health care like Alina. So there was a 2% tax that you would get. That was, with the last couple of years of leadership in the Minnesota House, that was pushed through to repeal that in 2019, which would then lose any revenue from the ERISA plans, which are self-insured plans like Target. We can capture no revenue from that to help other people when they're self-insured because it's federally protected. Basically, we need to make sure that that stays in place, create a pool, and we need a statewide pool of people. All these pools, the reason you can have it at your employer, somebody gets cancer and they will lose their or the rates go up because it's been too expensive. Literally
And
only half
time
the
is
answer.
up.
And it's a big, big problem.
Thank you. Does anyone have any additional comments on this?
I could go for another minute if you'd like. It's all right.
Then we'll move on to the next question, which also came from the audience, and it goes to Tony Jurgens first. Do you support a user tax on gasoline to fund transportation? Why or why not?
You mean additional gas tax? No, I don't. For one thing, the gas tax is the most regressive tax that we have. You pay the same as I pay versus somebody who's a multimillionaire versus the single mother who's driving an old beater with terrible gas mileage. She pays the same tax as we all do. And so for that reason, it's unfair. Now, I will say that a gas tax does have some merit in that we can use other people's money. People traveling through the state of Minnesota to fill up their gas tank are helping by paying taxes into our general fund. So for that, or into our transportation fund, so for that, it has some merit. But overall, I would say no because of its regressiveness.
Thank you. The question now goes to Jen Peterson.
Yes, I do support additional gas tax. I think it's something that would help with steering people also toward the use of mass transit. There are a lot of mass transit options out there, but people are sometimes reluctant to use it. And so I think if the price of gas is going up, I think that's going to give people that final push they need to say, let's get out of the car and get into mass transit, which we all know is much more environmentally friendly. And any time we are taking more vehicles off the roads, we are prolonging the life of our roads. We are reducing congestion and reducing emissions in the environment. So, and plus, that's a long-term funding solution toward investing in transportation.
Thank you. The question now goes to Dan Schoen.
Well, I'd like to say that the better answer is take all the information you have and determine what's going to be the best. In the Minnesota House this last year, there was a compromise that came together between Republicans and Democrats in the Senate and the House that came in, and I believe that the compromise was going to be related to tabs. And I'll tell you what, the compromise wasn't that great in my mind, because tabs were going to, it's a one-time payment a year. And so it was leading towards almost doubling the cost of tabs over a certain amount of years. So if you were paying $200 today, you would pay $400 in the future. Now, would you rather pay 3 more cents at one time every time you go to the gas pump, or would you like to lose another $200 out of your pocket at once? I know when I go to write the check for my tabs on certain occasions, if things are a little lean and I have to pay my car insurance, Tony, and you know, he's my insurance agent, but the you know, I'm writing that check and I'm like, that's a big chunk out of my bank account at one time. So you know, the gas tax, every tax has got some regressivity, but the property tax is the #1 regressive tax that there is. So.
Thank you. The question now goes to Keith Franke.
I would not support a gas tax. I believe and agree with Tony on the aggressiveness of it. It just impacts so all over the board. The only thing that I do like about a gas tax is that it's one of the few taxes that goes to a dedicated fund. The dedication of the gas tax and other taxes, license tabs, goes directly to Minnesota State Constitutional Certified Fund for Transportation, which helps us to lay out a budget. So when it comes to transportation, the ability to work within that budget, those are already set. Regardless if we're running a surplus or a deficit, those funds are already there. At this point in time in the economy, I would not support a gas tax. But the only thing, like I said, that is positive about it is dedicated to a certain fund and cannot be spent elsewhere.
Thank you. The question now goes to Don Slayton.
Mayor, 2 years ago, we were paying $4 a gallon and higher for gas. Today, we're paying $2 a gallon. What's more regressive, $4 for gas or a nickel to raise our gas tax to support a transportation? We were paying the same amount toward transportation in 2 years ago as we are now. Our cars are getting 50 miles to gallon, 35 miles to gallon, versus when I started out, we were getting 8 miles to gallon of gas. It hasn't increased now in the last 8 years. Previous to that, it was 15 years before we raised the gas tax. Yes, I support rising the gas tax and any other way, an option that we can come up to fund our roads, our bridges, our transportation.
Thank you. Does anyone have any additional comments? Then we'll move on to the next question, which will go to Keith Franke first. Do you support a user tax? Oh, wrong one. Was the last one.
It's a trick. See if you change the answer.
Here's the new question. What would you have done differently in the past legislative session to have avoided its failures to pass the bonding bill and work for the best interests of Minnesota?
I think I would have gotten my work done a lot earlier. I sat up that night and watched session, and I can't believe on both sides how it fell apart. We need to work together a lot sooner, a lot faster, a lot quicker to get the work done for the people. The communication lines have to be opened up. It has to be there. As we've said, you know, some of the bipartisanship that in the bonding bill and in the tax bill, I thought had some of the highest bipartisanship, yet it did not pass. So I believe we could possibly even, I'd be for the 24-hour rule. Well, nothing can be changed within the 24 hours prior to passage. So we need to, you know, get the work done. You get the work done, you open up the lines of communication, and you go from there.
Thank you. The question now goes to Don Slayton.
We need to end the gridlock. That's number one. The far right, the far left have pulled the middle so far from the center, neither side can work together. Number one, that's what I bring to this, the art of compromise, which I learned over 30 years as shop foreman at the wastewater treatment plant in Eagan, Minnesota. 5 unions below me, management above me. It's my job to make it all come together. That's what you do when you're trying to get work done. We need to end the gridlock. We need to stop the grandstanding. We need to have time to read the bills when they come out instead of let's rush these things in with 15 minutes left in the session. That's unconscionable. How can anybody vote on what they have not read or they know is in that bill? How can you vote on that? That's an impossibility. You're voting on something that, in my mind, you have no idea what it is. It's an impossibility. You have to know what you're voting on. Thank you.
Thank you. The question now goes to Dan Schoen.
Well, I was in the minority for the last 2 years, and I'll tell you what, the last 2 years was probably some of the most embarrassing and shameful things that I've seen happen at the legislature as it comes down to timing, public input, and the ability for even legislators to see what was happening in the legislation that we were supposed to vote on. 2 years ago, we came in mid or late in March. There was no time for the public to have any involvement, and they barely got any time or input the way it feels this last year as in the last session. Things were rushed. And I mean, the bottom line is there has to be more openness. I can't control that in the position of the minority, and I know that Representative McNamara has said that same thing. When you're in the minority, you're just sitting there waiting to see what the majority is going to give you. And, you know, there's a lot that needs to be done about transparency at that state capitol. I'll tell you that right now.
Thank you. The question now goes to Tony Jurgens.
Listen to everybody up here. We've got Democrats and Republicans all saying pretty much the same thing. We need to work in a bipartisan fashion. And I can assure you that all across the state, in forums just like this, you have Republicans and Democrats saying the same thing. So what happens between these forums and the legislature in St. Paul? It's the party pull. It's the parties that are pulling the people to their side, and then that's where you get the gridlock. I've been on, as I've mentioned, different boards and commissions. Most of the people that I served with had no idea if I was a Democrat or a Republican until I ran for office as a Republican. And I just work to get things done. And that's what we have to do in the legislature too. You gotta set aside the bipartisanship. And you know, everybody here is saying pretty much the same thing. They're saying it across the state too. When I get into St. Paul, you're gonna actually see that happen. I'll be able to work across the aisle with whoever else is in it. Who else? Thank you.
And the question now goes to Jen Peterson.
Thank you. Coming off of 8 years on the City Council, which is nonpartisan, we have worked together. Several different members of the council have come and gone from the council. And so learning to work with different styles of people, different affiliations of people, making it easier to try to get along and realizing that you need to give a little to get a little, and that you're not always going to get everything you want. And then I think if there were a way to address some of these most controversial issues first up front, instead of waiting to the last minute and then there's no time for debate, there's no time for public input, there's no time for transparency. I think if some of these bigger issues that were likely to be more controversial were addressed right up front off the bat, I think that would be one approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any additional comments?
I'd like to make one.
Yes, Mr. Franke.
I would like to add a little bit to what Jen was saying. You know, it's nice running or serving at the city council level. It is nonpartisan. And when I decided to run for this seat, I got a little bit of flack for this guy to my right being my friend. And my response was, when we come together, we might not always agree on how we get there, but we agree what we need to do when we get there. And working together with positive relationships or even friendships puts that playing field at an even start.
We have a confusion with our timers. You used up your 30 seconds. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Slayton.
We all work and serve on commissions, town boards, and we get along with everybody. There's very few arguments in the Cottage Grove City Council, the St. Paul City Council, the Newport City Council, the Hastings City Council, the planning commissions. We are out there working for everybody, and we make it happen on a daily and weekly basis. Bipartisan, it's there. It ought to be achievable at the state legislature. There's no reason not to.
Thank you.
We
Anyone
all
else?
agree on this.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Real quick, the number of bipartisan bills that are passed out of the Minnesota House and typically the Senate are in the mid-90 percentile. And it's the stuff in the news that is it's going to be over a tax where, you know, you have one side that says no tax ever, and another side that's going to say we might have to. That's the reality. Though it's going to be the hot button issues that's the only thing you're going to see. But otherwise, most of the time, everybody works together pretty well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then we'll move on to the next question. It goes to Tony Jurgens first. What would you do to bring transparency to the funding of interest groups which try to influence elections and legislators?
That's a good question. I think that, I don't have a good answer for that. I haven't been asked that question before. I think that, transparency, you hear at all different levels, and it's almost become a buzzword. But I think that with members of the press holding us accountable, we hold each other accountable. And I think that I don't have more of an answer than that.
Okay, thank you. Question now goes to Don Slayton.
Yes, that is a very interesting question. And you're right, Tony. There is no good answer that's probably going to come from the five of us up here on this, other than everything that we do at the legislature is under a microscope on a daily basis with the press and the television and everything, the cameras that are up there on us. And the groups that go and visit at the Capitol for Day on the Hill, which just about any action group, be it unions, be it senior caucus day, they're all there viewing what we do, watching what we do on a daily basis. That's transparency, being out there for the American public. They know what happens. The newspapers are following this. It's pretty clear. That is transparency, but the proper question probably is not going to come from up here on how to make it better.
Thank you. Question now goes to Keith Franke.
I guess when it comes to funding of campaigns and the transparency, there's transparency there. All you have to do is look for it and see where the money's coming from. I guess personally, just to get the money out of politics is where I would start. Like I have not taken or do not accept any special interest money, any PAC money, or any lobbyist money. My campaign's been fully funded by friends, family members, local people, and some friends that I have in business that are all local. So moving forward, I think if you pull that out of there, then we don't need to worry about transparency. We all run on what we have. I know it's hard because the amount of money it takes to run a campaign, and I know that, everybody's got a special interest, but if we're coming to the table and we want to lay everything out, let's just get rid of it.
Thank you. The question now goes to Jen Peterson.
Will you say the question again?
What would you do to bring transparency to the funding of interest groups which try to influence elections and legislators?
I guess I'm not quite sure about that. I don't know if the answer is more or different type of campaign finance reporting to make that more transparent. It's a really good question. I'm not sure.
Okay. Dan Schoen.
All right, well, I'll start at the federal level, and we repeal Citizens United,
Yep.
and which controls some of the unlimited spending that groups get to do as corporations or otherwise. But I'll tell you, at the state level, we've introduced legislation that would require outside interest groups to report who their contributors are. For instance, and that gets fought back by the National Rifle Association and the Minnesota Citizens Concern for Life, because they don't want to have to say who's contributing to their organizations and the interest groups that they have. And this goes for both sides. Both sides use this, Democrats and Republicans. But we do have to get that outside money out. And you could say one group is North Star Leadership Fund, which is run by the same people that run the Minnesota Business Partnership, which says it's a nonpartisan group. It's a 501c6, and they take dues, including from the University of Minnesota, MnSCUs, and newspapers. They transferred in January of this year $500,000 to the North Star Leadership Fund from the Minnesota Business Partnership, but you'll never know exactly where that $500,000 came from.
Thank you. Additional comments? Tony Jurgens.
I guess I missed a part of the question relative to influencing elections, and I would just like to say that Mr. Slayton and I have both had a lot of negative ads against us, and neither one of us paid for any of them. They're all coming from other groups. There's been negative ads against me paid for by the DFL party. My word of advice to people, when you get these in the mail, look in the corner to see who's paying for it. If it's a negative ad, you're not going to see Mr. Slayton's name on it, and you're not going to see my name on it, because we're not doing that. It's all these outside parties that are influencing. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Slayton.
Thank you, Tony. I was just going to bring that up. We have no way of knowing. There have been 3 slanderous mailings against myself, at least 3 against Tony, and we've kept this above board, clean. We like each other. This is a good working campaign. So with that said, thank you, Tony.
Anyone else? And we'll move on to the next question, which goes to Don Slayton first. The foster care system and child protection is in crisis. How will you give a voice to our most vulnerable and help protect our children?
Okay. First of all, it's not just the foster care system which is in crisis. It goes deeper than that. It goes all the way down to everybody who needs a helping hand up, such as my stepson, such as our seniors that are in the nursing homes that can't afford to be there. But we have to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. We need to fund better our health care systems, our social networks to do so. Jen Peterson works with this on a daily basis. She knows what it takes, and the underfunding and underpaid people that work in these systems. As a state legislature, we need to fully fund what is best for this system.
Thank you. The question now goes to Keith Franke.
Well, I think when it comes to child care, foster care, anything to do with children, we need to do what's best. I mean, God forbid that my children were ever left without parents and were ended up into a foster care system. I would be looking down from heaven and want everything possible to be done to care for them and to give them a home and to give them love. So, I mean, taking that into an account, whatever we need to do to fix these systems and implement better systems, I think I would be all for. But we also cannot just throw money at situations. We need to figure out what works and what doesn't work and take that into consideration and fund the situations that are positive and work, and maybe look at how do we address situations that don't. There needs to be checks and balances because we need to make sure these children are cared for and taken care of.
Thank you. Question now goes to Jen Peterson.
Thank you. That was foster care and child protection?
Correct.
Okay. I am a mandated reporter, so I have actually done some mandated reporting with child protection when issues have become evident in front of me. And I've talked with a lot of parents that are foster parents and have had really awful situations happen related to child protection. And it seems like the focus has always been reunification almost at any cost. And sometimes that cost is at the cost of the child's health and well-being. So I think we need to have more resources in the courts. And I think we need to have more resources available for our police officers because they're often on the front line dealing with these domestic violence situations or these child protection issues. So I think they need to have more resources available for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Question now goes to Dan Schoen.
First, I'd like to make sure that everybody doesn't have a movie view of what a foster child looks like and what the situation looks like, where they just show up with a suitcase and a neat little dress out in the country to go basically stay at Aunt Marge's. This is not the case. I've had the opportunity to have to bring these kids to foster care, and I've also met with the families that are doing the foster care. It is money. That is going to be the number one issue. When you're talking about a child who is coming from a home that the child itself is inhaling fumes from the narcotics use in the house or other traumatic environment because they were sexually assaulted, they were beaten even since they were an infant. And these are the issues that are dealing with. These are high needs children that need 24-hour monitoring in some cases. And these families are getting less than $30 a day to clothe them, to feed them, and provide 24 hours a day care, where they can't be out of their sight because they have such disastrous needs. They have to be brought to school, they have to be brought to other places, and they want to provide recreational activities. There's a lot to do here, and this is one area that's suffering in a major way.
Thank you. Tony Jurgens.
I'm sure that Officer Schoen has many stories that he could share with all of us that illustrate this point. And I don't envy you for being in that position. And thank you for that. The vulnerable adults, vulnerable children, we have, as a civilized society, have a responsibility to care for them. And we need to make sure that we continue to do that. And despite one of the negative ads we were talking about saying that I don't like kids or something like that, which came out the same day that I was touring a daycare or a couple of daycares, I do have a soft spot for kids. And so when I'm in the legislature, I can tell you right now, I'm probably going to be a sucker for those types of programs. But I think as a legislator, just as a person, we owe it to the vulnerable people in our society to take care of them. They don't all have the same family structure that many of us do, and many of us have the benefit of. And so in those cases, we need to provide that safety net for them.
Thank you. Additional comments, anyone? Then we'll move on to the next question, and it goes first to Dan Schoen. The amount as a percent of the budget that the state pays to fund higher education is lower than decades ago, making college more unaffordable. Will you work to increase state funding?
Can I ask you, is this related to college or is it just education in general?
It looks like it's just education.
Well,
higher education specifically.
Okay. You know, the first 2 years I was in office, we actually created a situation where there was a tuition freeze, at least at the U of M and some of the state universities. The difficulty is, you look back and talk to my parents in that range, they used to be able to live on a minimum wage job and go to a land-grant university like the University of Minnesota and afford to pay tuition for their kids to go to school. And at some point, for whatever known reason, and this is not my expertise area, tuition has skyrocketed. And we've either allowed it to happen or for whatever reason, it continues to do so. What I can say is we need to have programs in place that control the costs, but also when we look at students coming out of college with the debt that they have, you can renegotiate a loan in your house, and you should be able to do it for a student loan debt as well too. But it's a monopoly and you're trapped. And it is an unfortunate situation, but we do need to create those investments in a better way at our universities, especially our public.
Thank you. Jen Peterson.
Will you say that again?
The amount as a percent of the budget the state pays to fund higher education is lower than decades ago, making college more unaffordable. Will you work to increase state funding of higher education?
Absolutely, I would. I have 5 children and 5 grandchildren, so being able to afford college is a big deal for me. I also went to college as a struggling single parent. I was fortunate enough to receive scholarships and grants to pay for the entire cost of going to St. Kate's. so I didn't have to take out a loan. But I know one thing that's really helping our family is we have a son that's in the plumbers union, and he's going through the apprenticeship program, and so that's been a great benefit for him to be able to get college at a more affordable rate. And so those apprenticeship programs are great. And then I also have a daughter that's attending Park High School, but also going to Inver Hills right now through the PSEO program. And she's going to also almost have a 2-year degree by the time she's done and graduates from high school. So that'll be a huge cost savings for her. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Jurgens.
When I graduated from college, I had a student loan that I had to pay, and I think it was, I don't know, $15,000 or something like that, and that was a burden on our family as young parents. And now people are graduating with 10 times that amount. I can't even imagine what it's like. One of the real answers to that, though, is that college isn't for everybody. Jen Peterson just mentioned a son or somebody that's in the trades. The trades are just crying for people right now. I see in the audience an owner of a heating and ventilation company can't get enough techs to work. Some people need to go in to the 2-year trade school direction as well. But yeah, we need to control the cost of tuition, but we also need to expand what we're looking at as far as post-high school education. It's not all a 4-year degree. Some of it is trades or obviously the military option for some people as well.
Thank you. Don Slayton.
My father could only afford to send my sister to college. I joined the military in order to send myself to school afterwards, after 4 years in the Navy. I went to trade school, was a machinist in the union. Many people, as Tony says, cannot afford college. Trade unionists are screaming for help. You earn while you work. You start at 60, 70%. You earn your way up to 100% in a 4-year time period. The opportunities are out there. Yes, I will work. I will screamingly say yes to work for lowering the cost of schools and colleges for our children. It's what we do for the next generation. They will be the ones supporting us as we supported our parents.
Thank you. The question now goes to Keith Franke.
I think that, as a parent, my daughter now in her 2nd year of school, we initially started off at one college, and she attended the PSEO program also at Park High School. And it turned out that didn't work out so well, so we went to a different college where she's doing great. 4.0, she just made the honors list, so I'm a proud father right now. But the amount of credits that did not transfer over from one college to the other are different. I think there needs to be some information systems put in place to help the parents navigate through to make these decisions, to not only help with college or go through a trade, because we definitely need to educate our children in our workforce. Our workforce is struggling in other areas, and we need to make sure that people are applying and getting jobs that are going to help them not only pay down their debt, but to live a successful living.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments? Yes, Dan Schoen.
I'd just like to say that, we've kind of created an environment that if you don't have a master's degree, then, we've left our children to believe that maybe they're not going to survive. And there is a lot of great people in the workforce that have associates and bachelors that should fit the bill for these promotions in these companies. And if they have a requirement for them to do further training, it would be nice for some of these companies to also help in the programs where they help pay for some of the tuition and needs that the students might have. But it's about the environment that we've created around the need for such a PhD or a master's as well, too. And in many cases, it's not necessary.
Thank you. Anyone else? That, unfortunately, was our last question. And we're going to move on to closing statements. And we will go in reverse order that we had opening statements. And we will begin with our candidate, Don Slayton.
Okay. Again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this tonight and for everyone who's out there. Thank you for taking the time. I also want to thank those who are watching on TV or will watch this later. I'm sure you have other demands on your time. That you choose to spend it here shows you care about the issues and this election. It's vitally important. Through my travels through the district, I have learned that most people are less interested in politics than the policies that affect them. Issues such as healthcare, education, jobs, water quality, and infrastructure. Political gridlock serves no one and irritates everyone. No matter which side of the political coin you are on, remember this: we all have more in common than we don't. The far left and the far right have pulled the center apart. We need to find the middle ground to achieve the greater good for our children, our families, our community, and our state. Thank you for participating tonight.
Thank you. Now with his closing statement is Tony Jurgens.
Again, thank you to the League of Women Voters for having this forum tonight. Thank you to the rest of the candidates that are up here. This has been kind of fun. I wasn't sure how it was going to go. I've been working hard over the last many years on the different boards and commissions to help make our communities stronger. And I do that because I enjoy it. I want to take that to the next level. I want to be your state representative because I want to represent you, I want to represent your families, and I want to represent your businesses in St. Paul. I want to take a balanced approach to that. I want to be able to work across the aisle when needed to get results. I have friends and family that are on both sides of the political aisle, so I'm accustomed to listening to all sides when I'm making a decision. I would appreciate, and I'm asking humbly for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jurgens and Mr. Slayton are your candidates for House District 54B.
4B.
Now with their closing statements for the House District candidates for 54A, we'll begin with Jen Peterson.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for watching this, and to the League for putting this on. And so I really don't consider myself a politician. I've been at this for 8 years, but what I've been at longer than that is being an advocate and being involved in my community, being a volunteer, serving my community as someone who cares and somebody who listens and somebody who is, you know, an action taker. So that's the approach I'm going to take to the legislature, and that's the approach I've used at the council. And, you know, the issues I've worked hard on at the council level are the same things I'm going to work hard on at the Capitol: affordable housing, healthcare, education, transportation, economic development, the environment, and so many more. I've got quite a few different endorsements, but the ones I'm the most proud of is with from Senator Katie Sieben and Representative Dan Schoen and Washington County Commissioner Carla Bigham. But the most important one is from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now with his closing statement, Keith Franke.
Thank you. Well, once again, I want to thank everybody for showing up. I'm not used to this big of a crowd, like I said, but I would like to bring forward to the state the common sense and fiscal responsibility I've used as mayor of St. Paul Park. I would like to let everybody know that when it comes to representing this area, that I will represent everybody, every facet of this District 54A. I have family that live in every city in this district, so when making decisions, I will take into consideration every city in this district. I will also take into consideration the fact that as a leader, you need to set the tone, which I've been able to do for the city of St. Paul Park, putting myself out there, getting involved in other communities, getting myself involved in civic organizations and helping out where I'm needed. And this is the same type of common sense that I'll bring forward to the state. I just want to humbly ask for your vote. I appreciate you taking the time. If you have any questions, look me up on keithfranke.org and feel free to contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Those are your two candidates for House District 54A. Now with his closing statement from Senate District 54, I'll get all this straight, is Dan Schoen.
Well, I want to thank the community, my neighbors, and everybody that has supported me and continues to support me. It's been a humbling experience to be your state representative, and I really look forward to being your state senator as well. I want to speak as a father and as a leader and as a police officer. Because one thing that we didn't get to talk about was our national political climate. And I'm going to tell you right now, as a father of a 10-year-old daughter and a police officer in the community who's worked narcotics and violent crime and worked with victims of sexual assault. I will not stand by, and I will not accept that we have a presidential candidate and people who support him that believe that what he said he did, he committed sexual assault, and that's okay. I go out in the street to the Capitol, and I fight for victims every day, and that's a lot of the legislation I work on, and they are further victimized by those statements and by the inaction and by the silence of the men in our community and our lives for our daughters and our friends. And if you're a good Christian, if you're a good person, you'll stand up and denounce that.
Thank you. I would like to remind you that Dan's opponent, Leilani Homestead, was invited to participate tonight, but she chose not to. So the League thanks the candidates for their participation tonight, the South Washington County Cable Commission for videotaping this event, the City of Cottage Grove for the use of their facilities, our League volunteers, and you, our audience, for your attendance and interest. Let your voice be heard. Vote on November 8th. Thank you and good night.